Today was the conclusion of another one of those Harry Potter weekends that have traditionally aired on the Freeform network. I watched the Deathly Hallows, which concluded a couple of hours ago, and I have by now seen it numerous times. I was one of those people who sort of missed out on the Harry Potter phenomenon back when the books were first released, and I think that was in 1996 or so, and then later when the films were released. I did read some things about it, but just for some reason never got into it. Well, last fall, around Labor Day, Freeform ran one of those Harry Potter movie marathons that they've become famous for, and unfortunately that's going to be ending in 2018 because the rights to broadcast those films are moving to NBC Universal, and there will, I'm sure, be plenty of opportunities to see the films on USA and also the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't know whether they will do these weekends that Freeform has done. I certainly hope that they do. But after watching about the last 30 minutes or so of the Deathly Hallows Part 2 for the very first time last fall, I got really intrigued with the books and the movies, and I decided that I was going to read all of the books and see all of the movies and figure out what all the fuss had been about, and I did so. I read all those books within about a 3-month period, and that is saying something because the books are really, really long. Some of those books are 800 pages or more. And in reading the books, I decided that I agreed with the fuss. I thought they were just fantastic books, fantastic literature, and the films were outstanding. The producers did an outstanding job with those films. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, as originally created by J.K. Rowling, were profoundly likable characters. You read the story of the boy who lived and the kind of life that he had at the Dursleys and how it all came about, that he eventually learned that he was a wizard and went to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and it's impossible not to like Harry Potter. He's just a thoroughly likable character. The same is true of Ron Weasley and, of course, Hermione Granger. And the films were just outstanding as far as doing the books justice. They had some kind of a master caster who cast those films because it seemed that all of the roles in the Harry Potter films were just cast perfectly. The first film that I actually saw was The Chamber of Secrets because I wasn't able to get my hands on the Sorcerer's Stone to begin with. I eventually did see it. I have now seen all of the films quite a few times since last fall. But I saw The Chamber of Secrets, and all of the characters were instantly recognizable. As soon as they appeared on the screen, you knew who they were. I recognized Professor McGonagall as soon as I saw her on screen for the very first time. Maggie Smith did an outstanding job as Professor McGonagall. And ultimately what you have in the Harry Potter franchise, in the books and the movies, is a story of the triumph of good over evil and the fact that love conquers all. You also see the power of true friendship and what that really is all about, and you see fierce loyalty. You see people fighting with and sacrificing their lives and risking their lives to do the right thing, to do the good thing, and that includes everybody from Professor Dumbledore to the Three Amigos to Madame Sprout, Madame Pumphrey, and just a great number of people who did the right thing and who fought for the right side, and ultimately their sacrifices did work out. A lot of them gave their lives. Remus Lupin and his wife, Nymphadora Tonks. Fred Weasley ultimately loses his life, as do a number of other people. You also see some fantastic character development in the character of Neville Longbottom. Neville is kind of this bumbling, stumbling guy, and he seems really, really awkward to begin with, but by the time you get to the Deathly Hallows Part 2, he's just an amazing hero and plays a big role in saving the day. And of course what we know subsequently of Neville's story is that he goes on and replaces Professor Sprout as the professor of herbology. And I don't know how it would work out as far as what house he was going to be the head of, because he was a Gryffindor and Professor Sprout was the head of Hufflepuff, but probably he was a head of a house. He may have been the head of Gryffindor because by that time McGonagall was deputy headmistress. And so I got to see again this past weekend how the story unfolded, and ultimately we did have the triumph of good over evil, and the friends were extremely loyal to each other, and good triumphs, and love conquers all, and just an amazing story. And I'm always a little bit sad to watch the Deathly Hallows Part 2, because it's great to see how it all works out and how everything comes out to the good, but you also feel a little bit sad because you're sort of saying goodbye to the friends that you've been with on this long journey, so to speak. I got to thinking, what would I say to the three main stars of the Harry Potter film series, and what questions would I ask them if I got a chance to sit down and have a talk with them? You know, they did an amazing job. So probably the first thing that I would say would be to thank them for the outstanding work that they did in the Harry Potter films. Those stories and the characters they play have brought tremendous joy and happiness to a lot of people over the years, and I feel like probably the Harry Potter franchise is as big as it's ever been. There you find various discussion groups on the internet. The Harry Potter film series and the book series certainly has its share of superfans. That was explored in the TV special Tom Felton Meets the Superfans. Tom Felton was, of course, the actor who played Draco Malfoy, and you find various discussion groups. Freeform runs the marathons periodically, at least they probably will several more times this coming year, and then there's no doubt that there'll be plenty of opportunities eventually to see the films on the NBC Universal channels. And so it was a huge cultural phenomenon. Now, for better or worse, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson will be Ron, Harry, and Hermione for the rest of their lives. That's just the way that is. I hope they have reconciled themselves to that. You know, in 1966, a little over 50 years ago now, there was this TV series that appeared on the NBC network in the United States known as Star Trek. And little did the actors realize that they were in the ground floor of a tremendous cultural phenomenon that would still be going 50 years later, and people would still be talking about it 50 years later, that series ultimately would produce a number of TV series, and to date 13 feature films, the latest one being Star Trek Beyond, released just last year. And as far as we know, the Paramount is still planning to release another film in a couple of years from now. And the characters had some difficulty with being typecast for a while. William Shatner did not fully embrace his role for many years. He wasn't sure that it was such a good thing to be Captain Kirk, but eventually he came to realize, you know, that's a very good thing to be typecast as Captain Kirk. Leonard Nimoy actually, a long time ago, wrote an autobiography entitled I Am Not Spock, and he was a little bit irritated by the fact that everybody knew him as Spock. And then later on he wrote another autobiography entitled I Am Spock, and so they kind of came full circle, the Star Trek characters did, in realizing that this work that they did many years ago had, you know, sprouted and spawned a tremendous cultural phenomenon and made them stars for the rest of their lives, and that it was just a very, very good thing. Well, presumably Ron, Harry, and Hermione, Daniel, Rupert, and Emma know that they're going to be those characters for the rest of their lives, and that is one, I guess, frustration in this thing of having accomplished something so huge so early in their life, because they essentially, I understand, grew up on movie sets. The movies started when they were very young. In the books, they would have been 11 years old. I assume that they were 11 or somewhere thereabout when they started the movie. And I would like to ask Daniel, Emma, and Rupert, if I could, that when they first walked onto the set of the Sorcerer's Stone, did they have any clue what they were getting into? Obviously, the books were tremendously popular by this time, so the books were very well known among young adults and teenagers and children, and also a few older people. I wonder how they felt when they first walked onto the set of The Sorcerer's Stone, which I believe was released in 2001 or so. Did they at that time have any clue what they were getting into? Did they know, or did they suspect that they would actually grow up on movie sets and become, I understand it, as I understand, they are still best of friends with each other, which makes sense because they did, in a sense, sort of grow up together, and they did fabulous work. And the people who cast the Harry Potter series just did an amazing job. Alan Rickman as Professor Snape, Richard Harris, and then Michael Gambon as Dumbledore, the Julie Walters as Molly Weasley, just Brendan Gleeson as Mad Dog Moody. Just so many fine. Maggie Smith did an awesome job. Matthew Lewis did an awesome job as Neville Longbottom. A lot of characters just did an outstanding, amazing job. And they're going to be those characters to a certain extent for the rest of their lives. I wonder if they had a clue when they first walked onto those sets back in, I guess, 2001. And then another thing, I'd like to know, what was it like to essentially grow up on movie sets, because that's what they did. The story carries us from the time that these young witches and wizards are 11 years old until they are 17. So some very important years of their lives were spent growing up on movie sets. I'd like to know a little bit about how that worked. What did they like the best? What did they like the least? Who were their favorite people? Who were their least favorite people? Did they think that they might be playing in spin-offs forever? Now, that hasn't happened, because J.K. Rowling has said that The Cursed Child, the stage play, is the final word on Harry Potter. Who knows? Maybe she'll be convinced to do something more later on, and I think Tom Felton and Daniel Radcliffe have said that they wouldn't mind playing those characters again, and I would like to see them on the screen again as characters in The Cursed Child. Of course, they would be a lot older, but that might work well too, because they are a lot older. So that possibly would be very workable. But, you know, I'd like to know what they've been doing since. Now, I could look that up on the internet. I'm sure that they have continued to act. I think Daniel Radcliffe lives in New York City, which suggests to me that he's probably doing some Broadway or something similar. And from what I understand, the others have continued to act. But the problem with achieving that kind of success at their ages is, how do you ever top that? How do you ever top the work that they did in Harry Potter? Would they even want to? Because people really do want to remember them as Ron, Harry, and Hermione. That film series and that book series has continued to acquire new fans many years since, and it's very understandable, because great literature and those are great movies. I guess another thing I'd like to know is, how did it feel when they knew that this experience they had shared for so many years was coming to an end? I guess my favorite movies in the film series are Prisoner of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, because there's still a lot of fun going on in those movies, even though Goblet of Fire does take a turn for the worse with the reappearance of Voldemort. But once you get to the Order of Phoenix and sort of moving forward from there, you're in a more serious stage of the story, because things are getting very serious, and it's moving toward the inevitable conclusion of the final battle with Voldemort, which I'm sure was in the mind of J.K. Rowling to begin with when she first started the series. You can see evidence of that all the way back in the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone. But how did they feel, and how did the other actors feel when they knew that this experience was coming to an end, and they knew that this was going to be the last film? Was the atmosphere when Deathly Hallows Part 2 wrapped, was it celebratory? Were they celebrating the fantastic accomplishments that they had achieved? Or was there also a little bit of sadness in realizing that they wouldn't be coming back, at least not anytime soon? I think I saw part of an interview with Emma Watson in which she said she'd been used to doing the same thing for so many years, and it came around to that time of year when they would normally start production, and the realization kind of hit that they weren't going back this year because it was all over as far as they know, still as far as we know. Warner Brothers has in fact acquired the movie rights to Cursed Child. If that ever goes into production, of course, there would be some significant issues with that, because after all these years, could you get original cast members back after all this time? I think Tom Felton and Daniel Radcliffe have suggested that they would like to reprise their roles. Would it possible be also to get Rupert Grint and Emma Watson and the actor, I should have looked it up, but I did not, the actor who played Ginny Weasley, because she would be very, very important. And I should have looked up her name before I started this discussion, but I actually did not. So how did they feel when they knew it was coming to an end? And another thing I'd kind of like to know is, what have they been doing since? Are they okay with the fact that they're going to be defined, probably, by Harry Potter for the rest of their lives? It would be extremely hard to top that fine work, and I would assume, quite possibly, that their acting careers actually peaked at that time. And that does happen with a lot of people. A lot of people, especially when it comes to television stars, for example, if a person becomes a famous actor in a television series, normally that one series is going to define their work in the public consciousness for many years to come. And once the series is over, it's never quite the same again. Some people do get 2 or 3 chances. The American actor David Hasselhoff got a chance because he starred in the TV series Knight Rider, and that was a big series for a while. Then he got his second chance later on with Baywatch, and so he came back. And that happens from time to time. But with a lot of famous actors, it's just that they are defined by that one big shot that they had for a while, and then sometimes things are never quite the same again. Now, I know that undoubtedly they acquired a lot of wealth through the Harry Potter films, hopefully enough wealth to last them the rest of their lives and to be able to live comfortably and do whatever they want to do. But I wonder, do they get the same sense of accomplishment from later work that they have done? Does it bother them maybe if some of the later work doesn't really rise to the level of popularity of Harry Potter, because they're always going to be defined by Harry Potter? That's just a fact of life. I think that probably, like the Star Trek characters, they should embrace that fact and live with it and attend a convention, because I have no doubt that there are conventions, considering the number of discussion groups that I see on the internet. So I'd like to know a little bit about how this whole thing has affected their lives. Have there been any negative effects? I'm quite sure that there have been positive effects when you talk about the wealth that obviously was accumulated and the fame and the fan appreciation that came from being part of such a wonderful series. And so those are just a few things that I would like to know if I had a chance to sit down and talk to the stars of the Harry Potter film series. I would like to say that since I read the books and since I saw the movies, I've become a huge fan of the series. And I enjoy watching you guys every time you appear on the screen. Every time there's one of those movie marathons, I'll reschedule my activities to see it. Matter of fact, something funny, BBC America has been running the original Star Trek series on Fridays for a long time now. They've gone through the series several times. They run about 5 shows a week. And a couple of times I have noticed that there was one of these Harry Potter weekends on Freeform, and I'd switch over and then schedule the rest of my weekend so I could see all of the Harry Potter films, because I can't quite get enough of that story. I tremendously enjoy seeing you guys on the screen and that fantastic story and the fantastic job that you did with that story. So great job. Thanks very much for the work you did that has brought joy to millions of people. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how that's affected your lives someday and what you're up to now, if I had a chance to ask that. But thank you for your work on Harry Potter. You guys did a tremendous job and will be remembered for decades to come for your work on Harry Potter, one of the most popular and beloved film series of all time.